I am recording this part of the session. I didn't get to it for the earlier part, but I'm going to go ahead and from here on out, I'm going to go ahead and record the sessions so that if you have problems, you get kicked off and you got other issues, I'll give you a link to where you can go download basically the videos and kind of watch them on your own time. That will probably be beneficial if you're having intermittent connectivity issues. So there'll be a day or two lag time because I have to process them, and it's a somewhat time-consuming process. But I've used that in the past. That's worked. It's worked well. So I'll start using it. Today. Anyway, welcome back. When we last left our heroes, we were going to deal with security policy issues. Okay, let's finish up chapter 1 here with security policies. And essentially it's where there's so much at stake, so many items to secure, so much kind of riding on it, you have to have guidance and documentation and so on. So a written security policy, generally originated by somebody above your pay grade, defines everything that happens in your organization from a security perspective, and that gives us the opportunity to implement those policy items. Like, for example, here's a security policy issue for a particular policy for our fictional company Develtech, Develitech. That sounds better. Password policy kind of describes, what in the policy statement, what it's all about, why this policy is in existence, who does this policy cover, and then the implementation section basically gives you the guidelines. In some cases, the guidelines are pretty general. In other situations, the guidelines are very kind of specific. But again, every policy is a little bit different, but they follow the same general format. But again, this policy, which defines, say in this example, password-related items like how often you have to change your password, and all passwords must be changed every 3 months, and passwords must not be inserted into emails, and blah blah blah, those kind of things. So the policy, the governance, if you will, defines what it is that you have to do in regards to this particular security element. But the security policy doesn't enforce anything. So in our example, in our environment, we use Microsoft Active Directory. And Active Directory has the various password policies, password length and password age and password complexity and those kinds of things. And basically there's a tool within Active Directory known as group policy. And this group policy tool, those two words together, group and policy, put them together, group policy, that's an Active Directory tool that allows us to essentially implement the requirements that our various security policies put down. Like this password policy tells you, here's what you have to do, but it's still up to us to implement it. Well, we have a very convenient tool in group policy that allows us to implement these policy items and then push it out to everybody in the organization. So again, a typical policy will be comprised of these various sections: the statement, a standards section. Again, certain policies have additional components to it. The standards allows us to determine, hey, are we in compliance with the policy? And a situation where that comes in very very handy is for something called an SLA, a service level agreement, where you are establishing a particular level of service with a third party entity, a power company, or an internet service provider maybe. If you need to achieve a certain level of production or a certain level of availability or something, and they're willing to participate in that, and you have them sign a contract to that effect, well, that contract's going to include a standards section by which you, the customer, if you will, can verify that the provider is indeed providing the level of service that they're contracted to provide. So again, this the standards section gives you a way to measure whether or not your policy is actually being implemented properly, being adhered to. Guidelines and procedures. Guidelines are more general. Procedures are more specific. I mean, you might have a guideline section which kind of lays out in general terms what the policy is going to do, and the procedures gives you the more step-by-step instructions for specifically exactly how you're going to accomplish some activity. Now, the security policy covers a variety of individual policies, things like your acceptable use policy. This defines what you can and can't do with company computers and company computing assets and so on. And that's a way to ensure adherence. You've got users that they're new, they get hired on, they read and sign the acceptable use policy, and that can be used as a way to remove them from employment if they don't follow the letter of the law concerning the policy. Things like privacy policies. Now, of course, in the government space, we generally have what's generally referred to as no expectation of privacy, and that's that's as it that just is what it is. The audit policy, what it is that you're going to be keeping track of. You may be required by external governance. For example, you are in a regulated industry. You're in the financial services industry. You're in the healthcare industry. There are laws governing what it is you have to keep track of and so on. And so whether you will like it or not, you have to audit certain things. You can always audit more than that, but at a minimum, your policy will specify what you have to audit. Extranet policy. An extranet is a secure communications channel between business partners, generally implemented as a VPN, virtual private network. So your extranet policy, you'll have probably a separate one for each of your customers or each of your business partners that you do business with in this way, to cover which assets those people can access on your side and vice versa, and how long the agreement is good for, and that kind of thing. Password policy. Wireless policies, which kind of wireless devices, what protocols must be in use, and where wireless devices can and can't be used, those kind of things. Social media policy. 10 years ago, who'd have thought that the State Department would say it's okay to run Facebook on your on OpenNet, and now it is. And why? Because social media's taken on additional roles and functions, as kind of the go-to way to communicate with people and so on. So if you're going to be using these third-party social media tools, you should probably provide some governance as to how they're to be managed. I mean, Facebook and Twitter are pretty common things, and things can go terribly, horribly wrong if you don't exercise some control over those things. You will find, there's a little blurb in the book about it. There's a couple places you can go that they mention. There's plenty of places you can go, but a couple of them specifically are something called SANS.org. There's the Sysadmin Audit Networking and Security Institute, or SANS, and you go up to their website, and they've got all sorts of great free stuff you can download, templates on how to create these policies and so on. So make it a point at some point. It's not really testable, but go there and look and see just the type of resources that are freely available. And now some stuff is free, some stuff you pay for, but most of the stuff that is useful is free. There's a standards organization, ISO.org. We're ISO compliant with a variety of things, and this kind of describes basically which ISO standards are which and so on. And there's also a reference to something called RFC 2196. Now, RFC stands for Request for Comment, and the RFCs are the governing documentation behind all things TCP/IP. And one of them is this RFC 2196, which is the Site Security Handbook. And if you were to go follow this link or any link, I mean, you just do a quick search on RFC 2196 and find a variety of places where you can go look at it. It's a big template on basically an organization's security policy. And if you go there and take a look at this document, you might be surprised by having had seen it before. It's a lot of organizational policy, security policy documents are basically built on the RFC 2196. So it's definitely worth at least familiarizing yourself with. So go check that out. So that's cool. You've got our tool for actually implementing these policies. Policies are written guidelines. I mean, they were passed down, maybe orally in the past, but essentially they're written guidelines, which is great. And in order to enforce them, we have a tool, this group policy tool, that's available to us through Active Directory, Windows, that lets us implement those policy items that you'll find in the policies themselves, and allows us to blow those down to our individual users. Security documents. Now, certain documentation has a more secure status in terms of you need to protect these documents maybe to a greater degree than certain other types of documents. For example, imagine the fun that would come from having your system architecture information sort of publicly available to any bad guy that wanted to try to hack your network or bust into your system. So again, that's kind of a protected category of documentation. Change documentation. Change is inevitable. Things change. Things change all the time. But at the same time, we have policies and procedures. We have checklists. We have particular ways that we accomplish our daily tasks. And we need to have those daily tasks accomplished in a predictable fashion. But we need to be able to incorporate and deal with change. So having well-documented change procedures allows us to have a way to submit a request for change, have that change reviewed and tested before it's approved, and then the documentation associated with changing the procedures and so on. So change documentation, very important to ensure that changes are managed properly. I mean, change happens, but we have to manage the change. Logs, there's logs everywhere. And logs provide a very good record of activity, and that can be used in an after-action sort of capacity to troubleshoot or run down a security like violation kind of scenario. And finally, your inventories. It would be useful for the bad guys to understand what equipment you have and what versions and model numbers and so on, because that might enable them to determine that a particular piece of equipment is subject to a particular exploit potentially. So protecting your inventories from prying eyes is probably equally important. So again, the concept is these are documents that are kind of afforded special handling from a security perspective just because of their sort of fundamental importance in maintaining a secure environment. Mentioned change management earlier, the concept being change happens. We need to ensure that change happens in an approved sort of well-documented fashion. An example would be, let's say Randy here, he's in charge of some critical system that runs on a specific server. And basically the idea is that system is not allowed to go down, right? No downtime. So as part of his management responsibilities, he also discovers that, hey, an update has been released for the model of computer that system runs on. And just before he goes to apply that, he goes, wait a minute, let me check the change management procedures. Oh, the change management procedures say if it's a mission critical system, you must test the patch/update in a non-production environment first. Oh, great, let me do that. Sure enough, the patch fails and the non-production test server comes crashing down. And boy, good thing I didn't apply that in the production environment. That would have been bad news. So again, that's true, and that's why you would do something like that, so that you have some way to ensure that things don't go south any more often than they need to. Now, documentation is afforded specific handling requirements, and there's different categories of documentation that need to be handled in specific ways. First of all, documents need to be classified properly, and there's going to be someone in the organization whose job it is to provide that classification. Things like confidential, secret, top secret, or the less military, less formal, public, internal, those kind of things. Again, there's no federal law necessarily that covers that. There is for us because we are working in a federal space, but there's a variety of things that you can do there. But again, the point is, somebody needs to be on the hook for determining the classification of your stuff, and generally, based on that classification, you'll have different retention and storage requirements. Some things can be stored in the filing cabinet. Other things require that they be stored in the safe, potentially. And then, of course, disposal instructions. There's some things can simply just be thrown out. Other things can be shredded. Other things have to be burned or, sent into an alternate dimension, using Tesla coils or something. I don't know. So again, all these, the documentation, once it's been classified, then that kind of puts it into this kind of life cycle sort of environment where you have to, manage these things based on your existing standards. Okay, that's easy and fun. All right, and that takes us to the end of Chapter 1. There's another activity at the end of this chapter for going through security policy related things, and this is one that's going to require you to go to the data files section. You can download from the website or pull out of the kiosk, either one, and examine a document and go through and see what's going on. Again, that's probably also in your lab, or something very similar to that is in the labs that you'll be doing at the end of the day here. So now what let's do, I don't think so. It doesn't seem to be any kind of ramp up of the bandwidth requirements. You can participate or not. And like what you should notice, if you're really bandwidth impaired, you really won't be able to do the streaming video. You probably can't see my webcam footage, but it's actually the environment is actually pretty low bandwidth to begin with. So I mean, of all the choices we've looked at, but again, when you've just got really terrible bandwidth, that you're pretty much stuck there. But even the worst. Yeah, the worst generally is from the African countries. A lot of those guys are bandwidth impaired big time. But like I say, we've got some of those guys in the room with us right now, and they're kind of hanging with me, so that's good. And having these videos you'll be able to download should enhance the thing for you. But it's we're still evaluating alternatives and looking at other things. Again, this one seems to be less bandwidth intensive than, say, Adobe Connect or some of the other tools. Avatars notwithstanding, no problem. All right, hey, and we're back. Look at that. Identifying security threats and vulnerabilities. All right. So they come in a variety of shapes and sizes, from social engineering to malicious software and the various threats and vulnerabilities. So let's move into that realm here. Your social engineering attacks, again, this is using non-technical means to get access to whatever it is you're trying to get access to. Like, here's an example of impersonation. I got the bad guy calling you, the custodian of the resource, and saying about, hey, I'm part of the help desk, please, we're doing something, I need this. And some people are just born salesmen, and they can, sell anything to anybody, and they can, smooth talk their way into pretty much any situation. So, again, education and training, user education and training. It's a recurring theme when dealing with social engineering attacks. You got to, kind of, trust but verify. You can't take it on face value necessarily that some random phone call you got is actually from, the help desk. And people asking for passwords, that should send up a red flag anyway. So you might want to, say, hey, let me call you back, okay, and then hang up and call tech support back. No, we weren't trying to call you. That will alert you right away that the guy was trying to scam you. But there are a whole bunch of different types of social engineering attacks. And there's, some scenarios in the book they give you, right? An executable file, something with an exe extension, to a lesser extent a zip extension, or a VBS. VBS is Vacation Bible School, Visual Basic Script. And that's essentially executable code, and executable code can do very bad things if it's executed on your system. Now, important safety tip, one of the reasons that you're supposed to log on as a user and not as an administrator, even if you are an administrator, for normal operations, you shouldn't be logged on as an administrator. But Mark, what if I have to do something administrative? Well, then you right-click the thing and select Run as Administrator, But under normal operations, any code you execute will execute using your security environment. So if you're logged on as an administrator, any executable code you runs under your security context, which is potentially bad. Giving that code, access to stuff at the same level as you. Whereas if you're just logged on as a, Joe Hamhead, average user, then the scope of that code is much reduced. It's got less access to stuff than it would if it was running under administrative credentials. So, again, you want to stress to your users that, hey, listen, unless you're actually doing something administrative, log in as a non-administrator account. Again, that limits the exposure. Bad guy calls in like this guy, trying to pretend to be somebody he's not, with the attempt to obviously to gain access to something they shouldn't have access to. And then, of course, running executables is a bad idea anyway. You should always scan your executables, because you run something that looks like, oh, this looks fun, I'll run this, but it may actually wind up infecting your machine and causing problems. So, again, just be aware. And your social engineering, thing about social engineering just in general, not all of them, not every social engineering attack, but they're pretty successful. And they do tend to be updated to kind of reflect current, situations. As soon as Twitter and Facebook became popular, there were exploits that were created to take advantage of those platforms and so on. The second bullet there, exploits trust issues. I mean, users need to be trained what to expect and what to not do. Under no circumstances, if somebody calls you, do you provide any information? If it's a legitimate thing, like for example, if you get a call from the bank and they need to talk to you about your account or something like that, it's like they may very well need to talk to you, but the right thing to do would be, hey, listen, let me call you right back. I got to go do something. So you hang up and you call the actual bank using their actual number, and you will verify very quickly. Oh yeah, you were talking to so and so, and let me connect you to so and so, and then carry on. But an unsolicited call, that's it's not that it may be legit. It may be. It's probably not, but you never know. So call back. May pose as you might get some email from your branch chief with a Gmail extension instead of a state.gov extension. and asking for something that appears to be perfectly legitimate, and you're wondering, wow, why? Oh, he must be calling from home or something. Okay, well, I'll go ahead and respond to the request. Well, that may not really be your branch chief. It may be some guy with a fake email account just to fool you into something. And also, if the circumstances appear to be, this one in a lifetime deal, or it's urgent that I get this information immediately, users kind of panic, and sometimes they lose their best judgment sometimes, and users can be potentially swayed in those ways. Users may rely on too much. Groupthink. Groupthink is basically, a single user is smart. A group of users is dumb. A bunch of users traveling in a big pack, a big herd, are only as smart as the dumbest guy in the group, basically. So whereas individually, you may apply the appropriate amount of caution to the process. If you're kind of caught up in this kind of herd mentality, and everybody else is doing something, so you figure, oh, everybody else is doing it, I better do it too. Whatever else, that could be a problem. There's more information out there. I mean, I don't remember the statistics. It's some dumb statistic about how much the volume of information increases every 6 months or whatever it is. Point is, there's just more information, so we need to be more on our guard than we were, potentially. Organizations struggle to strengthen the human element is the soft spot. You've got users that are negligent, malicious, overworked, underinformed. How do we best train our users what to look for, what not to do, and so on. So that's a good question. So you've got training programs and awareness programs and all of those things that you need to put out there so that the users have the training, and you have the documentation show the users have had the training. So at least maybe you've got some way to maybe discipline somebody that does something they're not supposed to do, especially if you can show that they've been counseled or trained, specifically not to do that. And again, you're only as good as your weak link. You might have some really fancy information system, but if your human factors are weak, if you allow for like non-complex, very easy to guess passwords, well, boom, then all the other safeguards and secure things built into that system just disappear because the user is able to get in really easily. So again, all systems, there's no perfect system, but we work at it, we make them less flawed. But the point is, there's always somebody willing to attempt to compromise some flaw in some system, so to get at that. The old "a fool and his money are soon parted" kind of a thing. So again, let's make it difficult for those guys to operate. Some specific types of social engineering that you'll see, and these are on the test as well. Oh, also notice throughout the book, you'll see little references, usually in little kind of gray bar sort of information. It points you to something on the website in the Learn To section. If you go into the website, hit the Security Plus thing, there's a Learn To tile down there with that's specifically referenced throughout the book there. So as you are reviewing this stuff and going through the book, as you see those little Learn To links, go there and check it out and see what they have for you. All right, so let's take a look at some of these social engineering types. Spoofing. You're pretending to be, well, impersonation is you are pretending to be somebody else. A carbon-based life form is pretending to be some other carbon-based life form. But spoofing is generally associated with addressing, IP addresses, MAC addresses, DNS, web addresses, all those kind of things. There's actually very little to prevent you from crafting a packet with a fake IP address on it or a fake MAC address in there. So spoofing, pretending to originate from somewhere that it didn't originate, for the purpose of maybe getting through some firewall or something. So again, emails, you can have emails with modified headers to look like they came from someplace legit when they really didn't, kind of a thing. So kind of almost all of your different addressing systems are plagued by spoofing attacks. Impersonation, of course, is more the human factor thing. You've actually got carbon-based life forms pretending to be something they're not. A hoax is one of those deals. It's not real. It's it's not technical. It's not like a virus or something that executes and does bad things. It's some email that says, "Hey, this is a very dangerous thing. Tell all of your friends if blah blah blah." And it's like, oh my gosh. See, then you and the herd that follows you will all panic, and they will all fall for whatever bogus instructions are in that email or whatever. So the thing about a hoax, even though it's not real and has no actual physical component to it like a virus might, a hoax, if the story is good enough and the user believes it and the user does whatever that hoax message says to do and causes damage, the damage is still caused. It doesn't matter how the damage got created, it got created. So if the question comes up, can a hoax be as damaging as an actual virus? The answer is yes. It doesn't matter who deleted the files off your C drive, they got deleted. Everybody at this point knows what a phishing attack is. It's an email exploit. I might send out millions of these phishing emails pretending to be, Wells Fargo Bank or, Bank of London or whatever, in an attempt to get some, sucker some user into thinking that's a legitimate link that I need to follow, and then I need to provide all this information to my, bank. Users are getting much better about identifying phishing scams and not falling for them, although there's still users out there that will fall for that stuff, and it doesn't take much to, make it worth the bad guy's time. If I send out 10 million phishing emails, 10 million, and only one person gets suckered in, that's a win, man. That's that's one of the win column for me, because I got some account information. I can now break into that guy's account and clean his bank account out or whatever. Been a big day for me. So again, phishing is more of a it's not targeted. It's sort of, I don't want to say random. Random's not the right word, but again, phishing is kind of non-specific. It doesn't have a specific target. Whaling does. You'll see the terms whaling and spear phishing. Those are targeted phishing attacks. Whaling, that implies the high value, high dollar user, the real target that it would be beneficial to compromise, as opposed to some little small fish. And spear phishing is kind of the same thing, but it's a targeted attack, targeted like specific users or or whatever. So you'll see the terms phishing and spear phishing and whaling all essentially having to do with email attacks. Now there's also what's called vishing, which V implies voice. So it's kind of a similar concept, but you've got you get sent to a voicemail prompt, and you're answering these voicemail prompts, and the voicemail is asking you the same stuff that the phishing email would. So just kind of be aware of that. Okay. URL, that's your Uniform Resource Locator, right? Your web address. URL hijacking or typo squatting. There's plenty of websites you go to, and if you fat finger it just a little, like for example, let me give you an actual example from the archives. I was at another training company some years ago, and I had there was this trainer in there. It's, this nice young lady. She was doing some internet training of some sort, and she was supposed to go to the website www.whitehouse.gov, which is like an official government website, but she accidentally, she went to whitehouse.com, which back then was really a really disgusting porno site. So she's got her back to the screen. She's talking to the class, and their eyes are all bugging out. and she turns around and sees this, these disgusting, lewd, pornographic activities taking place on her screen. And she was so mortified, this poor girl, she left the building and never, ever returned, never came back. She could not live with herself. She was, so ashamed that happened that she was, she had to quit her job. It's like, oh my gosh. Me, I would have come back. It wouldn't have affected me that much. I would have just clicked away from it and had a good laugh. But hey, that's, So the point is, bad guys have already thought of all these kind of links that, if you fat finger something and spell something backwards, there's already somebody that's grabbed that link, that owns that link. And you might not have noticed the misspelling or the use of the wrong extension, but the bad guys have. So just something to be aware of. That's here's in the news. I don't know who the provider is, but there's new top level domains, TLDs, including .porn, a couple of others. Well, in a highly publicized show, the performer Taylor Swift, she was kind of offered first crack at these domains. So essentially, what she did, she bought the Taylor Swift.porn domain, so nobody else could buy it, and and just utilize it in that fashion. So that's kind of socially responsible, but I wouldn't say that's the norm. But that happened just in the last couple of weeks. Something to be aware of there. So that's kind of an issue. The fact that you think you're going to a particular site and you're not really, potentially because somebody else bought that site that's like one letter off from the one you thought you were going to, kind of a deal. Spam. Let's talk about spam. Spam is just unsolicited email. That's really all it is. It doesn't even have to be malicious to be spam. However, a lot of spam is malicious in that it contains malicious links, carries malicious attachments, or it's just some of the stuff is just contains these huge attachments with video or whatever else. And the problem with those is, they can wind up clogging up an email system and so on. So spam is bad just in that regard. And spam, the term spam, that's new. That has to do with instant messaging. The kind of stuff, you'll be looking at your Twitter account, and then all of a sudden something will pop up on your Twitter account asking you for something from somebody, quote unquote, and so again, that's bad. You don't want to provide your password to some instant message window that popped up on Twitter or Facebook or something. So so that's a whole new category known as spam for those instant messaging type applications, a lot of which are sort of built into our favorite social media apps. Now, shoulder surfing is just what it sounds like. You're walking past somebody looking over their shoulder as they're typing so you can learn their password. You're standing in line at the ATM and you look behind you and the guy is, he's 6 feet behind you. He's not really up in your thing. In fact, he's on his phone talking to somebody. He's not talking to somebody. He's got his phone out and he's got his camera pointed at the keypad. And he's taken high definition video of you entering your PIN number, and then then he conks you over the head and steals your ATM card. So shoulder surfing is basically a way to learn somebody's password. Dumpster diving. Okay, for those of you from a cultural perspective that are not familiar with the term dumpster, it is a large trash receptacle. Large enough for people to climb into them and kind of crawl around and stuff. So dumpster diving truly implies climbing into a dumpster and rooting around for valuable intel. And some companies, they on a schedule they throw out certain things on certain days. They may throw out old hardware, obsolete hardware, and software, and who knows what else. And the sort of underground dumpster diving community actually, has a schedule for when the XYZ Corp throws out their old software into the dumpster they go to retrieve that kind of stuff. So again, things that, get thrown out with the trash, might very well be, removed from the trash by these dumpster divers. The term tailgating used to be called physical piggybacking. That's where, and you guys, this applies to you. When you access a space with your access credentials, only you are supposed to go through that door with your access credentials. Now, at FSI, we've got those kind of turnstile deals where you run your card through and put in your password, and the turnstile rotates to let one person go through there. So that one's pretty good about that. But if it's like a regular door or something like that, multiple people potentially could enter on one person's access credentials. So this is bad. That's referred to as tailgating. Now there's a corresponding technology which goes with that that you'll see a reference to, known as a man trap. A man trap is one of those things where there's one door to let you in, then that door closes behind you, and there's another door to let you out. Sort of like a little sort of vestibule, little kind of secure space where potentially further scanning could take place. Who knows? But so tailgating, there's a technology associated with that known as a man trap, which has one door to get in and a second door to get out of this little sort of trap, if you will, squirrel trap looking thing. All right, hackers. Everybody knows that hackers are bad people. Not really. It didn't start that way, but is pretty much turned into a negative connotation. These days, the term attacker has gained some popularity, because that's pretty obvious. That's always somebody bad. A hacker doesn't have to be somebody bad. It used to be if you were a hacker, you were handy to have around because you could solve software problems and yeah, that's right, the computer enthusiast. I like that. Criminal activity enthusiast. So hackers, or attackers rather, come in several flavors. Now, again, this is all very entertaining, but essentially, remember, your attackers, there are really kind of two broad categories of things that are going on there. Either these guys are trying to gain access to something they shouldn't have access to, or they're trying to prevent access to something that you should have access to. Okay, your malicious insiders, these are potentially your most dangerous folks because they've already got access credentials. They can already get into the interior of your system and do inappropriate things from a position of strength. So this is bad. Your hacktivists, these are your computer activists, your Greenpeace types, and your Free Tibet types. Those kind of guys that will hack the Chinese Tourist Bureau's website and write Free Tibet all over the web pages, that kind of thing. Thieves are bad. Who's with me? Okay. A script kiddie. This is a guy that doesn't have any real technical skills themselves, but will go to the appropriate hacker websites and locations on the internet where the smart guys have placed malicious code for pretty much anybody to gain access to, and these guys will go there and use these programs for sport more than anything else, and they can be a significant source of problems. Like, for example, you get something goes on out there in the real world, and then you get that hacker group Anonymous. They'll pop up. Anonymous is, who knows, how many actual people are. Maybe it's like one or two guys, really. But the deal is, then the news media reports that this army of hackers, attacked this website. Well, really, you get somebody leading the charge, and you get a bunch of these script kiddies that get a hold of some piece of code that will cause a denial of service. There's a popular program which is freely downloadable called Metasploit, which, you clown around with that for a little while, and pretty much you're an expert on how to run denial of service attacks on people. So there's really, probably the reality is there's no like army of hackers that are that are swarming these websites and bring them down. It's probably a couple of hackers that are sort of leading the parade, and then all the script kiddies are just kind of, they want their 15 minutes of fame, and they're, part of something bigger kind of thing. But the point, it's still a bad thing, and still your systems need to be secured against them. Electronic vandals, the cyber terrorists, these are the guys that use particular types of software to, ransomware, like, hey, your files have been encrypted with public key encryption, and you have to pay me $300 in the next 24 hours, or I'm going to delete all your files, and you can't retrieve them, which is true. So there are these ransomware attacks that are serious attacks, which explains why it's more important than ever to back up your stuff, because you may be in a situation where some hackers able to, get into your C drive through some exploit, encrypt all the files on there, and without the corresponding key, you're not going to be able to decrypt them, as we discussed earlier. So, you might be left with, I'm just going to take this thing down to bare metal and, recover, rebuild an image and recover my data from a backup. So, again, if you're in a situation where you're going to be destroyed because some hacker attack destroyed all the data on your C drive, that's your fault. It's your fault for not backing the stuff up, for not keeping a copy of it, just in case what if your computer caught on fire, and you lost all your files that way? You still lost all your files. So again, there's a variety of bad people out there that are willing to do bad things to you. Okay. And you might see a reference to that on the test somewhere. Not a huge deal. Man, it must be raining wherever Fabrice is. He's in and out like crazy. Okay. There's a couple of Activity 2-1 is entertaining, is kind of fun. We're not going to do it live, but the deal is they run a scenario for you. You're the new IT guy, and the company's all scared of these various attacks. And then there's these scenarios. Is this a real attack, or is this just a false alarm? And going through that is useful and fun. So I recommend that you go through that exercise 2-1, maybe even today. After we're done with the class here. And before you get into your labs for the day. So just kind of be aware of that. Moving on to topic B, malware. That's what's called a portmanteau, a combination of two parts of two different words to create a third word. Mal for malicious and ware for software, so malicious software, aka malware. And there are, as you can see from the slide, malicious code attacks. There's different types of malicious code. So we need to talk about those guys. Let's talk about viruses first. A virus, infects. If you get a virus, if you get a virus code in memory, it's going to affect other files that are in memory. It's going to infect them. It's going to write its code, overwrite the target file's code with this malicious code. And then the way viruses get spread to other machines is through things like email attachments, or another category of malicious software known as a Trojan horse. The Trojan horse is generally a delivery mechanism for virus code. But viruses, they're basically they're self-replicating. This code replicates itself into other host files that are also in memory, and by moving those files from memory via email or some other technique to another machine, allows that machine to become infected, and so it goes. So virus is self-replicating code, but a virus, very important, a virus requires an external delivery mechanism. A virus doesn't deliver itself. It has help, either via, say, email or a Trojan horse program. Not to be confused with the next category, which is a worm. And a worm is like a virus, except the big difference is a worm can deliver itself. It's self-replicating code that can deliver itself. And one of the primary ways a worm may do that is by opening up an email engine on the infected machine. Open up the SMTP service, and then using your very own address book as a source of addresses to email itself to. So that worm code can infect the target 0 machine, the first machine, open up an email session, mail itself to other users who then execute the code because they're stupid, and then the process continues. So some of the bigger outages you've heard reported over the years have been worm related. So the destructive nature of the worm is potentially very similar or identical to virus code, but the big difference is a worm can deliver itself. Okay. There's adware and spyware. Adware, just what it sounds like. I mean, somebody's monitoring your browser habits, and then, based on them, advertisements are, pop up on your machine, which, is at a minimum annoying, but it could actually wind up being worse than that. So most of your browsers these days are configured to recognize that and not allow those things to pop up on you and so on. But adware often works. Now, adware may be, there's nothing malicious. Like a virus may be, very malicious and does damaging, destructive things. Adware is just there to, essentially put a product in your face so that, you'll want to buy that or want to click on some link to win a free iPad or something. But not necessarily malicious. These things, generally don't have what you would technically call malicious payload. But it's annoying, and it clogs your bandwidth, and it could very well be malicious. Adware, and of course the corresponding spyware. The spyware, early on in the days of the internet, somebody somewhere thought it would be a great idea to keep track of the user's browser habits so that you could offer them targeted advertisements that corresponded with their interests based on the sort of sites that they visited. Which there's from a marketing perspective, there's a lot of merit in that line of thought, and that's great. But you know what? Certain negative elements of society have decided to exploit that for evil purposes, which is why we can't have nice things, right? So spyware and adware, while not necessarily malicious, the idea of spyware, somebody keeping track of where you're going and what sites you visit, that can actually be used against you. Somebody can maybe track your where it is you go, so maybe they can go there and figure out what it is you do, and we don't even want to go there. So spyware and adware are generally considered bad, and there's programs like, for example, Windows 7. You've got a program called Windows Defender, whose job it is to identify spyware and adware and remove it, basically. And then in Windows 8, the functionality of, there's Defender, which also includes the functionality of Microsoft Security Essentials, which is an antivirus program. So nowadays in Windows 8, that functionality, the anti-adware, anti-spyware, antivirus, has all been sort of combined into one program. But again, there's a lot of third-party utilities and other programs you can run to keep a handle on your spyware problem, your adware problem. Again, a Trojan, the concept there is this. It's a delivery mechanism generally for virus code, and it's not that simple though. Trojans, unlike viruses, they don't replicate themselves. They're the bad guy. You create some program that says see Britney Spears naked.exe, and you leave it. You post it on public forums, or you burn some disks and leave them laying around. And your unsophisticated users will run into this and go, oh, see Britney Spears naked.exe. I would like to see Britney Spears naked. So you run it, you throw it in your computer, and who knows? You might even see Britney Spears naked. But what you don't see is that keystroke logger program that gets downloaded that logs all of your keystrokes. You don't see that dialer program that dials some telephone number in the Dominican Republic to the tune of $2,700 a minute, that kind of deal. So these Trojans will deliver these malicious attachments, viruses, whatever, and the Trojan may also very well play a part in the execution of some of this malicious nonsense. So it's not just a dumb delivery mechanism; it's a delivery mechanism that also is executable and does potentially bad things. It's just something to be aware of. So again, that's the sort of preferred delivery mechanism for virus code, Trojan horse. A rootkit is a form of software that executes at the highest privilege level available. Generally, it's called the lowest level of a system. Like on a Unix system, that's the root level. Hence the name rootkit. So this, let me tell you a story. Some years ago, when music videos started to be released on like CDs, it was kind of a novelty for like this music video code to be released on some music CD. Sony Music, they had some of these things, and basically, hey, throw your CD in the computer and you can watch the music video. Oh, okay, great. Well, unbeknownst to us, what Sony did was, when the user did that, it installed a rootkit on that user's machine, and basically what it was doing was, it was looking for unauthorized copyrighted software. And you might be thinking, well, that's probably okay, right? Well, no, it's not, because you're not allowed to install something on a user's system without their knowledge and approval, and this thing installed in a complete stealth mode, installed, didn't tell anybody, and whatever, and basically, obviously, that was discovered. Sony got in lots of trouble over that, and everybody else kind of learned their lesson from that. But rootkits can be, well, first of all, not all rootkits are evil. Certain rootkits give you the appropriate level of administrative control in your system, but generally rootkits are associated with malicious code that is hard to deal with once it gets in there, because it's you have to be like super user to be able to deal with it. So something to be aware of there. Come on, you. And if you're a programmer, good question. If you're a programmer, this is another form of malicious code. You got this thing called a logic bomb. Now, any computer programmers in the house? Computer programmers? Show of hands. Okay. Anyway, computer programming languages, they're all similar, but basically you've got some common functions in there. And, one of those functions is, a selection function. Basically, based on a condition, I'm going to execute or not execute this particular line of code. If today equals Monday, then start security plus class, kind of thing. If the condition exists, then you do the action. So these logic bombs, if you're a guy that has some sort of programming expertise and you are able to insert said logic bomb into an appropriate computer code, module like the payroll system or something else, when a particular condition exists, it could be something as simple as like a date time exists, or somebody executed something, or something happened that caused this condition to become true, then execute the logic bomb. If you want some fun extracurricular reading, just do a Google search on logic bomb and just kind of read some of those entries. Some of them are pretty darn funny. But again, the issue is you have to have pretty much administrative level access to stuff and have a little bit of programmer expertise in order to do this successfully. No, you don't miss the good old days. The good old days weren't that good. All right, let's. And of course, everybody's favorite, a botnet. Bot stands for robot. Net stands for net. Network. The concept being, there's a bunch, as in untold hundreds of thousands of computers out there in the wild that are not properly secured, not running, updated antivirus software, just not properly secured. Now, our bad guy writes this botnet code. The concept being, like some infected file. The user downloads some file and it includes some extra stuff, including this botnet code. And if the user's machine isn't properly configured to detect the latest and greatest viruses and so on, that might get downloaded and executed without anybody noticing. Now, the thing is, the botnet code doesn't really do anything bad. Your system doesn't act stupid as a result of that. It's just kind of sitting there. And a lot of times what will happen is this code will open up what's called an IRC, the Internet Relay Chat, open up basically an Internet chat room, and just kind of monitor this IRC chat room. There's nobody in it, but it's just kind of monitoring that. And you have dozens, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of these infected machines that, again, there's nothing going on. There's nothing to cause anybody any alarm. But when the bad guy, the handler, shows up in the chat room, he then issues commands to these guys, his botnet army of zombies, to go out and conduct denial of service attacks on particular websites or perform other malicious activities, which then they will just gladly start doing. And in most situations these days, decent antivirus software will catch these things and not allow them to be there in the first place. And B, at least in a commercial environment, you've got firewall protection. So a firewall will immediately notice an unusual amount of traffic coming from the inside of the network to the outside of the network and identify that correctly as a denial of service attack and prevent the attack from going forward. And of course logging where it's coming from so that you can then eventually go to that machine and figure it out. But the caveat there is if your system is sophisticated enough to have that level of firewall protection, chances are pretty good you should also be sophisticated enough internally to have the appropriate level of antivirus, going on. So these things basically are kind of not in a kind of sort of commercial setting generally. It's a whole bunch of just kind of, mom and pop, users, your mom's computer, your grandma's computer, that kind of thing. It's not a far cry to imagine those things being infected and them not really having the technical expertise to know what to do about it. So, yeah, botnets. And again, some of these things are pretty bad in that they're run by organized crime, the Russian mob, those kind of guys. And these botnets are so big that other bad guys lease time on these botnets that are kind of owned and operated by the Russian mob, kind of a thing. So, if you're some low-level bad guy, you need to lease 2,500 machines for 4 hours to conduct some attack. They'll do that. Okay, here's your 2,500 machines. Have at it, kind of a deal. So, botnet's kind of a big deal. We need to, between the FBI and Interpol and Microsoft and those kind of guys, they're actually doing a reasonably good job of identifying them and shutting them down. I saw something not too long ago. One of the bigger ones, traced to some address in Russia. Basically, they caught the guy at the airport somewhere. He had a suitcase full of like a couple $1 million in cash in his suitcase and that kind of thing, and put him away. And everybody was high-fiving each other. But there's a little note at the bottom of the article saying, yeah, there's at least 2 more that are bigger than this one that we know about, so we're still on the hunt. It's like, oh my gosh, So these things are real dangers, and they exist. But again, any just normally configured antivirus software will completely put a stop to this stuff, in its tracks, in their tracks, in my tracks. This is one I was talking about earlier, that ransomware, and this is a real deal. There's a couple of programs that, again, if you execute them, the thing literally uses public key encryption to encrypt the files on your hard drive and then basically say, hey, literally pay. And the fees, I mean, it's the numbers are small, like $500 actually is a bit high for this, but the concept being, hey, listen, we want to get these users to decide it's less painful to pay this fee to get the key, which generally they get the key and everything's, and they're able to decrypt their files and it's fine. The bad guys, want the users to feel that it's less hassle to just pay the money than to have to go recover everything from a backup, or heaven forbid you don't have a backup and you're just out of luck, kind of a thing. If it was real money, like big time money, then it would be much more on the radar of some of the law enforcement agencies. So again, this is absolutely real. This absolutely happens. And your best, there's two things, obviously. There's, having a backup of your critical files, so if your files get lost, you can recover them. And of course, encrypt things yourself so that, nobody can, gain access to unencrypted versions of things that are important. That would be bad. So again, point is, these ransomware attacks, some of them are just, not real, but there's a couple of them out there that actually are real, and you would be well advised to be aware of them and know what to do. If you get to that point, it's probably already too late. But I've seen these kind of pop-ups that kind of say that kind of thing. It's like, you know what? That hasn't happened yet, because it's what a user will do. They'll see a screen that pops up and gives them this, your files are encrypted thing. Well, you haven't actually executed anything to enable that to happen. But sometimes when you go to close that file and you click on the X button on the top of the screen, that's where the execute code is. So I've seen people that are successful with these. Something pops up, it's like, okay, stop right there. You go to Task Manager, and then you just nuke your Internet Explorer session or your browser session without executing anything, and unless the file gets executed. If you just happen to go to a website and you see a web page that tells you that, when you attempt to close out of the web page, that's when they get you. That's where they've embedded the code to execute that file. So if you even see something like that, just don't even click anything. Just go to Task Manager and just nuke the whole session. Nuke it from orbit. It's the only way to be sure. Okay. Polymorphic. This is, when your neighbor's kid comes home from college, and you've volunteered to go ahead and clean up his machine. It's like, man, those damn college kids, man, I tell you what, I don't know. They get infected with various things, and some of these things will morph into other versions. It'll change to this, and then that will evolve into something else, and then that thing will evolve into something else. So by the time you actually get around to trying to clean that off, it's already modified itself into an unrecognizable format that you have no real chance of, you may be able to kind of walk the chain back and do it, but so things that change to avoid detection, that's kind of the reason that they do that primarily. So again, catching them up front before they have a chance to morph into something else is generally better. Okay. Here's a fun term, an armored virus. Again, these guys, their job is to prevent the scanners from being able to see them. Like, for example, you might get one of these infections, and the thing you may notice that this is weird. My antivirus software refuses to start up. I wonder what that's all about. Well, this infected file, one of the things it does, it interferes with the ability of like known scanners, known antivirus tools, from being able to initialize. So that's the fact that you can't start your antivirus software. That's a bad sign right there. So you may need to take other measures to get in there and protect yourself. So there's an activity following this little section. Okay, whoop, hang on. Let me share with the crowd here. If I can. Frankenstein's utilize built-in utilities to create the virus code on the host machine. Okay, these things essentially they kind of construct the code on the fly from spare parts that are laying around on your machine, and those are particularly tricky to treat because it's no two of them are the same. So that's always fun. Where'd you guys go there? All right. According to my research, it's 17 after the hour. What do you say we take a break? We're going to come back at I'll say 5:30. You guys adjust for local variations there. We'll come back at 5:30. We'll go another half hour till 6 again, adjust for local variations, and then the last hour will be reserved for you guys to go off and perform the lab exercises, and we will return tomorrow at 0400 UTC and resume this activity. So I'll see you guys in about 13 minutes. Elvis has left the building. That takes us to our next category. Software attacks. Stand by. Software-based attacks. Right now, your basic software bits. I mean, you got your. Well, first of all, let's start with the operating system. The operating system generally is produced by some pretty smart people at Microsoft and the various other software houses that generate our Linux distributions. And Apple these days is basically straight up Linux. Linux is Linux, obviously, and it's a Intel sort of based port of the Unix operating system. And Microsoft, ever since Windows NT, is effectively built on Unix. So essentially, all of the Android is Linux. All of the operating systems we're currently using have way more in common with each other than they are different. So, even so, there's a wide variation in code, and there's millions and millions of lines of code in these operating systems. So, so there's attacks against operating system flaws. There's attacks against the actual applications that run on our systems. The operating system, the primary job there is to provide a hosting environment for our application programs. I mean, you can't run an application program unless you've got a machine with a functional operating system. And then all of your network protocols, your HTTPs and DNSs and all those guys, ultimately under the hood, that's software. Another category is not even listed here, device drivers. That's software, firmware. So there's a number of places software exists, and all of those places are potentially flawed or subject to attacks. The first and most obvious is systems that use passwords for access. So again, not surprisingly, there's a variety of different types of password attacks, which we'll cover in a little bit of detail. Now we can protect the databases that the passwords are in. It used to be in like Windows 98 or something. There was a file, the name of which escapes me, but your passwords are just listed in this file. If you got access to that, you get everybody's password. But let's press on with that. The different types of password attacks. Guessing, not much of an attack. It's exactly what you think it is, which goes to education and training, and and it's much better now than it used to be. But users using simple, easy to guess passwords, that's bad. Stealing passwords. I mean, certain. Let's look at some of our network applications. Right, we've got old school network apps like Telnet and FTP. Thing about those guys is their passwords are transmitted in plain text. So even if your Telnet session is password protected, anybody with a network sniffer can grab the password just right out of a telnet packet, no problem at all. So it's by making things a little tougher for the password stealers out there. That's good. Dictionary attacks and brute force attacks. A brute force attack is every possible combination until you actually hit your target. Like the old saying goes, if I had an infinite number of monkeys and an infinite number of typewriters, eventually one of them would produce the collected works of Shakespeare. It's just a numerical certainty that's not very realistic, and the fact is nobody has that kind of time to sit around and wait for an infinite number of monkeys to actually generate something useful, which is why we make our passwords more lengthy and more complex. All right, so brute force attack. Eventually, you would, like for example, let's start at this logical conclusion here. A super short password, like a one-character password, there's 26 letters, 52 if you include uppercase, a few numbers, some special characters. So there's all in all, there's about, give or take, about 95 legal characters that can be used in passwords. So that would take approximately 0 time to crack that password. Now a 2-character password, that's up in the stakes. A 3-character password, way more time-consuming to break than a 1-character password. So the obvious conclusion is, the longer your password is, the more it will stand up to a dictionary or a brute force type attack. So the goal is to stay one step ahead of the bad guys and just make it so processor intensive, so difficult for the bad guys to crack the password as to make it not worth the trouble in the first place. It doesn't have to be, like for example, a 500 character password would do a pretty good job of deterring the bad guys, but it's overly complex, not very realistic for us. Apparently somebody at the State Department decided, a 12-character password is plenty long enough to provide all the security we need on a regular basis and still not make it too much of a problem for the users. So it just needs to be long enough to where it gets the job done. That's the beautiful thing about passwords. They just need to be long enough really to get the job done. So a brute force attack will eventually crack your password. The point is making it so difficult to do that it's not even worth the trouble trying. That's why you need to change your password periodically, because about the time the bad guy gets around to figuring your password out, you've changed your password. Now a dictionary attack relies on users being unsophisticated, using actual words that appear in the actual dictionary, include all the various variations of the word password, and if you want to have some fun, just do a quick Google search on 500 worst passwords. You'll immediately see a link that shows statistical compilation of the most terrible passwords ever that everybody's used. Stuff like clever stuff like 1 2 3 4 5 6. Brainiac stuff like that. So just kind of be aware. So the concept being a dictionary attack exploits those tendencies of users to use actual dictionary words. Now, in the English language, up to about somewhere in the 12, 13 character range, there's somewhere around, give or take a couple 100,000 words, which is a whole lot smaller space than the space you're dealing with in a brute force attack. Billions and billions of combinations. So dictionary attack is based on, an actual dictionary. A rainbow table is kind of an interesting thing. This goes back to, we have to talk about cryptography for a second. And let's pretend, let's use MD5 as our hashing algorithm of choice here. I'm using MD5. MD5 generates 128 bits of output. That, 2 to the 128th power. If you run that through your calculator real quick, you go, damn, that's a lot of space. That's a big space. but it's not an infinite space. It's a big space, but it's not an infinite space. So what that means is there are two completely different bits of input that will generate, just through mathematical happenstance, the same hash value. Completely different, absolutely nothing in common with the thing, but just due to just mathematics, it's going to generate the same. That's called a hash collision. So what a rainbow table does, the concept there being, hey, if I had lots of hard drive space and plenty of time, I could go through and I could basically essentially run a reverse brute force attack. I'll just run everything. I'll just run all the data in the world, through this hashing algorithm, generating the hashes for that. And everywhere there's a collision, basically I've got a much smaller list I have to work with. So where would that come in handy? If I'm the bad guy, I gain access to a database at some organization, and instead of the password, it contains a hash of the user's password in there. Well, if I have that armed with a rainbow table, instead of having to go through billions and billions of guesses to finally get at that password, I can basically go to the rainbow table, and I find a very much shortened list of all the basic, all the hashes that match. So that takes me a far less amount of time to go through the various iterations without having to go crazy. Now, the thing about Rainbow, there's a program out there called Rainbow Crack. You can find it out there on the internet. It's easy. And these things out there on these free websites, a lot of these things already have pre-generated hash tables. Good out to 12 or 13 or 14 characters. Requires multiple gigs of hard drive space. But the concept being, if you've got that, and you're in a situation where you have the hash of a password, but not the actual password, that rainbow table attack makes a lot of sense. A hybrid attack is basically, hey, you use a rainbow attack, and you use a brute force attack, and you use a dictionary attack. So basically, kind of a blended attack. I'm using a variety of tools, and basically the first guy that wins. There's no requirement that I limit myself to one type of attack. A hybrid attack is where I might be using a brute force and a dictionary attack simultaneously. And a birthday attack, the basic concept here is there's a flaw in the underlying math associated with the algorithm. What a birthday attack is, works like this. If you have 23 or more people, in a group, statistically, there's a greater than 50% chance that two of those people were born on the same day, month and year, day and month. And you're thinking to yourself, only 23 people, and basically saying there's no possible way. Well, see, that's not true. The deal is, if I was looking for a specific day, that would be much different. But basically, I'm just looking to match any 2 days. And as it turns out, going through the statistics of it, once you hit 23 people, there's a better than 50-50 chance that two of them will share the same birthday. So that's so that basically that's kind of a flaw. If your algorithm is built on that piece of math, it's a lot less secure than maybe you thought it was when you dreamed it up in the first place. To test that, you can do that whenever you got any size group really, and just for laughs, just to talk about it. One time, I was teaching this exact class, Security Plus class, at the end of the year 2010, because at the beginning of 2011, the certification went from a lifetime cert to a 3-year continuing education cert, like it is now. So there was a whole bunch of people that wanted to get that kind of grandfathered in lifetime cert. So I had the Security Plus class that had 50 plus people in it. It was huge. And we ran that and said, okay, well, here's what we're going to do. I'll start with me. I'll just holler out my birthday, and we go around the room, just say your birthday, and And as soon as somebody, hears their birthday, just, say bingo, winner. So I started, March 27th, and the next guy said, something else, and the next guy said something else. You know what? We made it all the way around the room, more than 50 people, and two of them did not share the same birthday. I was dumbfounded. And another situation, in this case, I had 18 people in the room. It was some Windows class, some server class or something, but I had 18 people in the room, and just for fun, I ran the thing again. Now, listen carefully. Not including the twins, okay, not including the twins, out of that sample of 18 people, really now a sample of 16 people, there were 3 people in that group that shared the same birthday. So I would have definitely won that bar bet. So the point is, it's statistically, certain situations are not going to pan out every time, but, whatever the deal is. So the point is, there are a variety of different password attacks, attacks against your password-based authentication scheme. And you just generally need to be aware of, what those things are. All right. More attacks? Of course. A backdoor attack. Now, this is where you get your system infected. Like those botnet attacks, that's a backdoor attack. That's where an alternative entry point into your system is created that kind of bypasses normal administrative stuff. And back in the day, it was pretty common for your operating system vendors, like Novell. This situation that I'm familiar with, we had Novell 3.11. That was the server. That was the release number. And it had a funny thing that would happen. If you were in the file system and basically when you installed Novell 3.11, the Everyone group was given read access to basically every folder. So if you wanted to change that, and I wanted to add just like the sales managers group and remove the Everyone group from a particular folder, I would go to the folder, and the correct procedure was add the new entities that you wanted to have access, and then remove the Everyone group from that. So then it would be restricted in this example just to the sales managers group. But if you did it wrong, if you accidentally remove the Everyone group first with the intention of, well, now I'm going to add these other groups, here's what happens. You remove the Everyone group, your system blinks for a minute, goes black, and then when it comes back, that piece of the file system is gone. You can't see it. It's like a black hole was created, and that folder and anything below it had winked out of existence. And it was still there, but now nobody, because you took the read permission away and you didn't add any other permissions first like you were supposed to, nobody could see it. So effectively Novell had to kind of come in, and they had a backdoor tweak in there that was hidden in the code somewhere, and they were able to reset that, give you access again, and that's just the way it worked. And that was fairly common back then. But the problem with those kind of deals is you can't keep those kind of things secret. Somebody's going to find out about that and exploit it, and that's why we can't have nice things, right? So these backdoor attacks these backdoors are no longer sort of institutionalized, but they still exist. There's still programs that you run for the purpose of creating a backdoor for there's legitimate purposes for these things, legitimate administrative utilities. There was a suite of utilities back in the olden days of NT. It was called Back Office, Microsoft Back Office. That's where your server product and your web servers and all those kind of things. That was part of the whole Back Office deal. Well, there was a piece of attack code or malicious code called Back Orifice. Pretty funny, right? Back Office, Back Orifice, and it allowed you to create a back door so that if you couldn't get in through the normal the normal way because you got locked out or something. well, then you could always exploit this this kind of security hole to get in there. Yeah, the problem with that is, it's hard to keep that stuff secret. The bad guys exploit it, and it's bad. Again, botnets, case in point. So again, they're generally frowned upon, and you typically your antivirus software needs to be up to date to where it will detect these things and prevent them from propagating. An application deck. You might have an application that if you send the right character into the right field of a form, the whole application may blow up. And there's plenty of bad guys, in the former Soviet republics, these sweatshops of computer programmers, looking for the next buffer overflow exploit that they can manufacture. So the application, and again, for many years, Internet Explorer, Windows Internet Explorer, the web browser from Microsoft, widely derided as a terrible product and full of security holes, which was essentially correct. And so as soon as a new version came out, all the bad guys were all over it, looking for some exploit and some place they could bust into the code kind of. So again, applications. Again, this would apply to operating system code too. Ultimately, I mean, remember the last time you upgraded an operating system on release day, then you notice that man, this is terrible. It's it doesn't work right, or this feature doesn't function properly, whatever. And after a few updates and eventually maybe a service pack or two, finally, maybe a year later, that operating system is working the way it was supposed to on release day. Well, that's just the way it goes. And applications can wind up being the same way. They can be released before they're 100% completely ready for prime time. There might be the occasional exploit here and there, but eventually through patches and updates they kind of fix it, and it's pretty solid and secure. But the point is, there are a variety of exploits out there that exist, and it's just up to somebody to find them so they can exploit them. And the bad guys are putting in much more effort on finding the exploits. Maybe the good guys are being more reactive in that a bad guy finds an exploit, and that exploit becomes public knowledge. Then the vendor jumps through all the various hoops to shut down that vulnerability, issue an emergency patch to fix it. So it's just kind of the way the process has evolved. Types of application attacks. Now, a couple of these are specific to sort of web-based applications. Like, for example, cross-site scripting. What happens here is you've got a web server and a web browser. Now, cross-site scripting attack is where essentially the bad guy is able to exploit some poorly secured web pages on a web server, and usually using something like a comments field or a notes field, someplace where users are allowed to go there and enter their own information, like type information in, like in a comment. Well, if some user goes in there and puts in like some script code into one of these notes fields, and it's registered on the system as script code, by virtue of the fact that it's not configured to reject script code and just display it as regular characters, that means a user could potentially go there and hit that notes field and have that code execute on their machine. So this is bad. So these cross-site scripting attacks, are taking advantage of or exploiting poorly secured web servers. A command injection attack. Okay, now there's something called a buffer overflow condition that we haven't really talked about yet, but a buffer overflow condition is what happens when a program is written. This program accepts user input. You're a programmer, you write some code, and you've got some page of information the user enters data into. It could be a Windows program, can be a web-based application, doesn't really matter. But the point is this: the memory space for the contents of that field have been allocated by the programmer. Now the problem with that is if the programmer does not also include code to verify that the user has not entered in more data than that field is allowed to hold, or data in an incorrect format, the excess data will overflow the buffer that was designed to hold that data, and that data winds up somewhere else. I mean, the brass ring of the buffer overflow exploits is allowing this random attack code to essentially gain administrative control over the target machine. Now, buffer overflow conditions generally are carriers, if you will, of injection attacks. And these injection attacks, basically, there's the most common one you'll see a reference to is a SQL injection, or a SQL structured query language. It's database language. So essentially, the concept is I'm going to try to get my SQL code to execute by entering in a bunch of excess data into this field, and having my injection code wind up in a buffer where it will actually execute, causing bad things to happen to my database. So again, there's a lot of trial and error involved, and like I say, remember my sweatshops, my computer programmer sweatshops in the former Soviet republics looking for these things. So again, these injection attacks are generally exploit a buffer overflow condition that allows extra data to be entered into a program, more data than it was designed to hold, and that extra data is going to wind up somewhere else, potentially with bad results. A couple of different kinds. LDAP is Lightweight Directory Access Protocol. Basically, that's an attack against like Active Directory or one of the other vendors' comparable products. Lucky you, a zero-day exploit. You are the first guy to ever see this particular exploit. Something was discovered. Bad guys discovered this exploit, and then your system is completely, let's say you've got the most completely patched and updated computer available. Well, there's only so much you can do for some malicious code that has never been seen before. So if you get hit with this malicious code that's never been seen before, well, there's only so much you can do. You're probably going to take a hit, and you're kind of like patient zero. You got to have patient zero before you can generate the cure. So yeah, it's just not your lucky day if you get hit with a zero-day exploit. Cookies, that's a web-based thing. It's a piece of information that goes back between the web browser and the web server. It contains instructions to the server on how to serve up the page, or contains maybe authentication information. Well, or contains authentication information. So potentially I'm a bad guy. I can grab your cookie and I can replay it later, trying to pretend that I'm you. That kind of thing. In this case, attacker injects a meta tag. In other words, there's data, and then there's something called metadata. Metadata is data about other data. So in the header of this of an HTTP file, if you will, HTTP conversation, there's going to be this metadata, which kind of describes other layers of data, other things that are going on in that HTTP communication. Well, if I can tweak that, add something in there that's not supposed to be in there, then that's going to interact with the web server in a way I didn't want it to, and other bad things can potentially happen there. An LSO attack. We've got locally shared object attacks, also called flash cookies. Objects stored on the user's website that may appear to be normal files that really aren't, and cause potentially bad things to happen. Even if a user wipes tracking objects from their browser, LSOs may still remain on their system. So that's one of the reasons people are kind of maybe down on Adobe Flash a little bit, Apple specifically. Attachment attack, well, that's just, attachments are very handy places to put stuff for delivery purposes. So, I can, download an attachment with some malicious code on it, unless your email scanner is designed to, detect that and deal with it, then you're going to have problems potentially. And then there's a reference to a buffer overflow on the, hold on, I'm on the next page here. Let me move on over. Yeah. Now in web browsers, you've got add-ons in your Chrome and Internet Explorer, Firefox. You've got these add-ons that provide additional functionality to your browser. Some of them are good, some of them are evil, sort of thing. So your malicious add-on may look like it's not doing anything malicious, only it is, and it's maybe not discovered right away potentially. So again, that potentially can compromise your browser by running an add-on that's not properly secured, which leaves a security hole open. Talked about header manipulation a little bit, attacking the header, which controls how that HTTP communication session interacts with the web server. Talked about a buffer overflow. Again, the concept is you're putting more data into a field than it is designed to hold, causing that excess data to go somewhere else in the system, and that's bad. Integer overflow, basically that's your kind of division by zero kind of errors, or you've got the results of a calculation, the space to hold the results are not big enough, that which could cause the system to crash, or could cause a buffer overflow condition to basically cause those problems. Arbitrary code execution, essentially systems that allow code to execute from places code shouldn't be allowed to execute from, potentially can cause locations that aren't normally associated with executable code to be able to execute code, and that's potentially bad. So again, there's a lot of this stuff, probably the large majority of this stuff, kind of needs to be caught during the development process, because most of these things, once the product is released, once it's been in the implementation stage, it's kind of too late, because these exploits already exist. So it's generally better to kind of not allow these exploits to exist when the program is actually released. So that's what that is. And stand by. So here's what let's do. I'm going to stop right here at TCP/IP. We'll get into network-based threats. We'll start up in the morning with network-based threats. So the plan is you've got technically an hour of class time to go up to the website, go to the logical labs, run the labs from Module 1, and run the labs from Module 2 up through what we've done already. If you want to get ahead a little bit, run a couple just for laughs, go right ahead. And the more times you run them, obviously the better information you're going to be able to get from that. So that, and I'm going to, let me go ahead and stop my recording right now. And tomorrow I'll get back to you on how to gain access to this recording. So stand by.